He's a smart guy.
Yeah. Jay should be here in about 5 minutes or something like that. And before that happens, dude, this whole thing. Okay, so Israel's gonna fight a multi-front war while the United States is gonna fight a multi-front war, and they're all relying on while spying on each other, and then also in the meantime still selling massive amounts of all kinds of everything to and with and trading with China. And so at the end of it, everyone's still pushing for a CBDC. Everyone's still pushing for some sort of digital ID, digital passport, regardless of whether it's health or finance or whatever. Elon Musk just killed Twitter and formed X Corp. Jay Dyer is with us right now, so we can bring him in. He's the host of Jay's Analysis and frequently hosts the fourth hour of the Lord Voldemort show. How you doing there, Jay? Good to see you again, man.
Hey, welcome. Or actually, you should say welcome to me. I don't know.
We're really happy to be here with you today, buddy. Thanks for having us on. Cheers.
Thank you.
Yeah. So I mean, yeah, there's a lot going. There's a lot we can talk about. I do have a couple of different stories in terms of like weird shit going down. But if you would like, we can definitely stay in the Middle East here for a moment. I'd love to get Jay's opinion on exactly what he thinks is going on with all of the alliances. We didn't even talk about Saudi Arabia and Yemen yet either.
Yeah.
But if you want to bring
that where it's going, we'll have to see. But it does seem that way. It seems like Saudi Arabia is just genuinely shifting, seeing the writing on the wall, essentially, with the whole, even just the petrodollar and where this all seems to be going. Like, I think that's happening there. I don't know. What do you think, Jay?
Oh, yeah, I think de-dollarization, I guess, I assume that's what you're talking about. That's all part of the plan, I think, for the technocrats to move us into this global order. I did hear you mentioning CBDC. So I think that, we're part of a legacy system in the West that is intended to eventually collapse and go away. So I'm kind of surprised how quick all this is happening. But then again, given how quick everything's been happening in the last 3 years, I guess it's not really surprising. But I would tend to say it's by design, but they also, this whole fiat system is built on a bunch of house of cards. So when it starts collapsing, maybe it's something that they can't completely contain. So I know that's not a lot of quality stuff to add to it, but I don't know, other than just that this is by design. I'm sure the banking elite want to set up more rival structures that can compete with the West, and to do that, I think that they aid the people that appear to be enemies, and so I would imagine that goes on in the banking structure as well. So I wouldn't trust BRICS or anything like this to be a real opposition to the Western banking system. I mean, as far as I understand, it's going to still be a fiat system. So, yeah, I think they tend to do this where they build up and they aid and they make moves to help further collapse and deindustrialize the West. I mean, the people who really run things.
I just saw a really interesting argument being made that the step will be, the BRICS direction will be to peg it back to the gold standard, which will then, and possibly by design, if you see this as more of a bigger psyop, that then justifies the drive from the other side to push more in the digital realm, to kind of counteract that, which is an interesting thought. I don't know whether there's evidence to that or not. I haven't been diving deep in the BRICS and what they're planning, but interesting, because a lot of us will be like, yay, pro gold standard. And maybe we're falling into a trap there. It's something to think about.
Well, I mean, Russian's currency and China currency are actually backed by, commodities, trade, gold, oil, those sort of things. I'm struggling with a hard time, especially when I speak to my friends, in the international community, when we go to other countries, about how explaining the fact is that why would the West be crushing their own system and ushering it in through the BRICS system, the digital fascism that we've talked about, and the techno fascism? Why wouldn't they just do it themselves? You know what I'm saying? Why wouldn't the West just form its own form of CBDCs and usher in people? Wouldn't that be an easier transition that way rather than crush this?
No, because we're too used to the dollar. We're too used to it. Like
but that's still being used to the dollar should be easier to get people into it. No, I mean
the CBDC.
Yeah.
No, man. So in the first place, you can't. In the first place, it's fucking imaginary, and we've been believing in this imaginary fiat currency for 50 whatever fucking 50 to 70 years. We've committed fully in we're full faith in fiat currency for most people. So you've got to get people to break a contract of faith before they're going to adopt CBDC. Now, the only way that that's going to happen for most people is that they're going to have a crisis of faith. And the only way that you can bring about a crisis of faith, if you're manufacturing the collapse, is to go ahead and do that. We're 50 years from Limits to Growth being published, for the 51 years since that was published. That we're 21 years out from the time that Agenda 21 was written and voted, all absorbed and passed. There have been 2 solid decades to get us to this point in terms of pushing the West to Agenda 21. It seemed to me like everything was happening at an extra accelerated rate until I was like, oh shit, no, this has actually been gamed out and on paper for a really long time. And fuck, dude, 80-90% of the same players are still involved in some way, shape, or form capacity. So yeah, we're in a period of acceleration overall, but the agendas that are being fulfilled along the way, those have been hanging out for a very long time, and they've had people whose entire careers have been dedicated to ushering them in. And so we're living in I guess it seems like everything's happening super fast when you're living in the free fall fucking controlled demolition of the American empire.
It just seems a little bit odd, though, to me that everybody's already in a form of, first of all, most Americans, when you talk to them, don't even understand money, even the fiat money. They don't understand how it's made, where it comes from, what's backing it up. They're just told it's $20, so they believe it's $20. But they've already had all of these forms of digital banking around, so it seems like it would just be an easier move to push people into the digital banking, the CBDCs, with the system you already have working. You know what I'm saying? I'm trying to grasp and understand how the collapse, this controlled demolition of the United States, of the empire, would lead us to go more into CBDCs, especially if it's coming from the BRICS nations.
To Steve's point, and it's a fair question. I think none of us know, right? We're all trying to kind of read the tea leaves here. And I think ultimately, to go to Steve's point, if you feel people need that crisis of faith to drive them, you could argue that, what's better, what's the most classic concept to point out some foreign adversary enemy that, if we allow this economic system to overtake what we're doing, and people are rationally drive into that. That's one way to look at it. But I mean, you make a fair point that people are already, to a large degree comfortable with digital assets, but CBDC is quite different. And independent media has been very clear about how this is not the same thing and so on. So I think what they need is people will not go into this willingly, at least some of us. I think they know that. So my opinion has always been that need that kind of rapid moment, the rug pulling, an EMP, and suddenly everything's lost. Don't worry, though. We have it backed up here. That's the kind of way I see that possibly going. But I think the BRICS part of it, it's also just possible that BRICS is a response to that. Like a genuine, we don't want to be a part of this we want the tyrannical control, but we don't want to be, lose our sovereignty to the control structure. These are all possibilities. It's hard to say. I'm scared of all of it. So I like more options, if that's happening, I'm okay with it as long as we're not being driven and forced into one or the other, ultimately.
Can we just relocate to those Tennessee campgrounds where we're going to do this event and just stay there and kumbaya and start growing shit, living there and just never leave? Can we do that?
We need to find a homestead set up. That's what we need. To a whole independent media nation, like the free state of Jackson, or what was it, Jackson? I'm forgetting that place now.
Jefferson, state of Jefferson. Yeah, no, I am all for the reclamation of the state of Jefferson. I would, and then we can just push it down a little bit further to like the top of, I don't know, to like Marin maybe. Yeah, they can still keep San Francisco. We'll take everything north of the Bay, and then up into southern Washington and over. But yeah, I think reclaiming Jefferson would be a prime goal. I have a number of friends who have property all over Northern California and Oregon. Ryan, I was telling you a little bit as well as Sonoma, that whole thing. There's like, I mean, it's not doable.
I don't know. I could not justify going back to California. I just couldn't do that today. Sorry. Because, I mean, as much as you may say you've got an area that works, like if you living in an area under someone like Gavin Newsom, I mean, that's just, the guy's shown himself to be.
Didn't you hear we're getting rid of him? He's going to be president.
Right. So we're hearing now, but that's just as scary, isn't it? Like, that's horrifying to me. That's why you need to declare an area. You know, the problem, though, is just like then the federal government comes in and squashes it. You know, which is, you know, we're supposed to be able to declare independence, right? But only when they say it's okay, right? Not Donbass, but Taiwan. You know, read it right.
Idaho's trying to adopt 2/3 of the state of Oregon.
Greater Idaho.
Really?
Yeah. They want to call it Greater Idaho. They're taking everything to like Bend. They want everything like through Bend. And then just sort of where, I guess, what are those, the Cascades there, where they start in the mountain range? I can't remember. But yeah, like basically that big blue strip down the Oregon coast. They're like, no, you guys can keep that. You can call it, you know, Junkieburg or whatever you want to do. You know, the Transfentanyltopia, however, make up it's yours. It's still Oregon. We have Greater Idaho now. There are people in Oregon. There are people that are like representatives of blue, solidly liberal state representatives that are like, yeah, no, they can have it. They can.
That's so interesting.
Well, guys, we have a cool guest on today. He's got an awesome hat. He's got a cool shirt. I own that same shirt. And I want him to confirm or dispel the myth of his Funko Pop. Is that Jay Dyer? Is that really you, or is that somebody else that's just like you? And do you have one there with you so we could see it? Because
no, I don't. I don't have that's not real. Somebody just photoshopped that.
Okay.
But when we do live events, it's part of the routine. I destroy it. So yeah, I destroy a Funko Pop because it became a joke on I don't know, some of the live streams that we did, because it's sort of part of the consumerist, really, you know, just the soy beta male culture of guys that collect toys. And so it's just something we were making fun of, and then it became its own thing. And then when we do a live event, I have a mock debate with one, and then I destroy it kind of Gallagher style. So but there's not actually a Funko Pop of me.
Yeah, I thought it was, and I don't know what it would.
It does look real. Yeah, it does look real.
I like when somebody made those like mock versions of action figures online, you know, with all the people pushing back on COVID. I thought that was hilarious. Like somebody sent me one of me, but there was one of Whitney, and it's just cool. It's like an action figure, and there's like all those little taglines and stuff. It's just kind of funny. But I do think there's a good argument to be made that we're talking about, you know, action figures versus dolls, and whether that's something.
They try to cloak the whole thing with, these are collectibles, they're rare, you know what I'm saying? There's limited.
That's why there's billions of them.
Well, I would say there's a difference between somebody who maybe collects things that are valuable, that are like not opened, versus somebody who buys them and plays with them. That would be quite a different.
No, I'm with Jay on this one. They want to buy toys, and they leave them in the box, but you can see everything, and look at them, it's cool, you know what I'm saying? And I mean, I even have one. I have a dude one somebody gave me that I think Steve has it floating around somewhere. But they want to buy toys. Sorry.
I thought it was here on the desk, but
Did Gomez get a hold of it? He thought it was
Gomez might have got a hold of it. I honestly, now that I'm thinking about it, I haven't seen it in a couple.
He was fixated on that thing.
It could be in the other room.
Well, it used to be you walk in a bookstore and there was books, and now when you go in a Barnes and Noble or whatever, and it's half of the store is toys now. Which to me is indicative of the winds of where things are going. So
I was in a record store yesterday, and there was a whole wall of Funko Pops.
What are Funko Pops? What is that?
They're little figurines with like very large heads and then small.
So it's like a
bodies.
trend. I've never even heard of that.
Yeah.
Well, they make them in real people or cartoon characters or movie characters and stuff. So as well, there's political ones. I got a Hillary Clinton and a Bernie Sanders one around here. That
he seems like Pasta's got a collection. That's what it sounds like.
No, I did buy 2 of them when I started my show to have Hillary and whatchamacallit. And then somebody gave me the dude one, and I gave it to Steve because it was the dude. See, there it is.
Oh, okay. So it's like a Japanese kind of overlap thing. It looks like
a little bit, yeah. And it's like the guys that collect these are just like Arrested Development beta male losers that. But I mean, they obsess over it, and we were just joking about it one day, and then it just kind of turned into its own kind of recurring joke. So
that's funny.
I have a 12-month calendar right now with inside jokes from the show. Because that's just how the thing works. Yeah. It's beautiful. Ryan, I'll have to. There's a whole bunch of Marmot artwork. I have a theory, Jay. I don't know if I've told you about this. In 2016, the Large Hadron Collider came to a forced stop and had to do a hard reset because a little marmot-looking creature got in there, got stuck. So this event, this forced stopping of the Large Hadron Collider, is what hurtled us immediately into the dumbest of all possible timelines, where a professional wrestling heel was elected president, and now there's a cocaine-addled hack comedian that is apparently in charge of an entire country in Eastern Europe, and all sorts of lunacy has gone forward. So the Marmot is the thing that we have chosen to blame, and has become a representative of many a joke on the show. But I do think that we are in the dumbest of all possible time. It's up for you to decide.
We had Fiorella telling everybody in the RT studios in Moscow about the fucking Marmot, and then we said
they cranked the Hadron Collider up 3 times faster than they ever fucking got it, and then immediately we had dioxin clouds and fucking exploding pipelines and all kinds of wild shit. So don't tell me that I'm not onto something, but it is funny as fuck.
It's the Mandela effect. We're all living through
we have a Marmotist, a woman who draws the cartoons, and it's like the Marmot is doing everything. The Marmot blew up the Guidestones. The Marmot derailed the train. You know what I'm saying?
Here's the Marmot at CERN.
See?
Oh yeah, nice.
And then look, my favorite is Rainbows versus Nazis. There's actually been a little bit of precognitive Marmot art. But yeah, here we have Rainbows versus Nazis, right? And then the little sheep with their phones out watching. Yeah.
The BLM mask is hysterical, by the way.
And then they're both wearing Fed jackets. Yeah. Wonderful. As the food supply burns. Yeah. Good shit. We have fun. Let's see. Put that over there. Have you guys heard about this oxygen ion battery thing? Have you been able to take a look at any of that? I definitely wanted to talk about it, and I really hope that I left the thing up. Where'd it go? Motherfucker.
What's the point? It's just a new technology.
Well, okay. So in the first place, they're talking about in the headline of the article could make the lithium-ion battery obsolete, which is at least interesting in terms of the race to acquire rare earth minerals to power the 4th Industrial Revolution. Now, what's also a little bit weirder about it. Dubbed the Forever Battery, the oxygen ion power cell is based on ceramics instead of rare earth minerals that never breaks down and recharges itself using oxygen from the atmosphere. Unlike lithium-ion batteries, which have a limited number of charging cycles, it never has to be recycled, maintains a constant charge capacity even in cold weather and climate extremes. Had a lot of experience with ceramic materials used for fuel cells for quite some time, says Alexander Schmid from the Institute for Chemical Technologies and Analytics at TUN. So here's the thing. We have been hearing about for a very long time in more of the, I guess, like truth community circles, about free energy, about 0 point energy, about ancient technology that has been hidden from us that would allow us to power the entire Arctic basin on absolutely, on the air that we breathe. Well, I mean, it seems like we're headed that direction, but here's the other thing: if it's powered by oxygen, what's stopping some of these sick fucks from being like, okay, well, you're the battery now, and going full matrix with it?
Mm-hmm. That's one way. My thought was we've either had that for 50 years and they're only rolling it out now because of the Great Reset, or it's a complete lie to get people with lithium to buy this and so they can sweep in for cheap. Who knows? That's my jaded take, as always. It's interesting though. I've never seen that before, so I have to look into it more.
Yeah, so here's the other thing. There's been a particular Joe Rogan episode with Randall Carlson that's been held back, where he's supposedly, him and his buddy who have been working on trying to figure apparently basically free energy source based on ancient technology. And that episode that was shot months and months and months ago is just still sitting in a can on the shelf somewhere. And there's been to the point to where Randall put out like a 15 lecture, just about 100 hours of content on it because Rogan wouldn't release it. Graham from Grimerica knows more about it. If you wanted to hit him up, I think he'd point you in the right direction. But in that time, there have been a couple of different articles in some of the science and engineering journals about basically free technology and about basically, what is more or less considered to be rooted in some sort of ancient, or, I mean, they talk about in that article, ceramics have been around since humans have been around. It's one of the first things that we figured out to do after we had fire was how to make bowls and shit like that. So it is quite literally ancient tech. So in terms of that, it could be the scientific community has been in a race with a couple of people who have been looking at it privately. And now there's a rush to get the technology out so that you can have the state capture it. This is just something that's been kicking. But all of this shit is fascinating.
Yeah. It's definitely interesting. It's hard to see where it goes, but I don't trust anything they put forward at this point. I really don't. I mean, it's not illogical to see how often we get lied to about how these things work and to immediately be like, well, I mean, let's question everything. Why would we take anything at face value? It's certainly possible. I just don't. I mean, you could point out a lot of different things that have been suppressed over the years, a different possible, like, look at Tesla, for crying out loud. You know what I mean? Like Nikola Tesla, like, it's not debatable. You can prove that the alternative version, rightly what, the version of electricity that they can't monetize, right? They could essentially create that for, free electricity. And they went with the direction that they could, monetize, which actually is far more dangerous, which we know, you can shock yourself and die. So it's interesting, so I just don't know if I believe that this is one being rolled out with good intentions, but I'm not saying I know that for sure. And two, whether or not it's even actually real.
It'd be fun to try and get a hold of like their actual research or get a hold of a presentation or something like that to see if we could replicate it and do it on our own.
Sounds complicated though.
I mean, ceramics as a fuel cell honestly sounds less complicated than assembling a lithium ion battery.
Yeah, well, I don't know how to do either. So
Right. I understand the basic concepts, and I've had enough electrician buddies over the years in carpentry and shit to where, a lot of I've got core concepts of a lot of it. This is something that when George Wiseman's on tomorrow, we're going to be, I think, talking a little bit about more in depth. He's got a background on that. But I mean, in terms of what we talk about a lot, and exiting the technocratic state or trying to work as outside of the confines of it, this is certainly something that could be really beneficial to that. You incorporate that with like hemp concrete and 3D printing, and man, you got a pretty legit setup there.
So is this free energy or cheap energy, or?
I mean, free energy as apparently, as long as there's obviously going to be manufacturing cost of, battery tiles or however they do it. But if it quite literally runs on oxygen and doesn't need to be recycled, that's as close to free energy as you can get after initial setup. I don't even know what, I mean, it's obviously they're not disclosing a bunch of details, but I don't even know what the maintenance on something like that would be. You hit it with some CLR every once in a while, a little toilet scrubber. I mean, like, I don't know. I'm not even really joking here.
My thought
is my dog snoring in the background in case anybody can hear that and is wondering. He's out.
My thought is the overlap with the solar industry, right? Is that this came out and it was, when one of those shifts happened, at least we're told that suddenly these things became more, feasible financially. And so all of a sudden it kind of rolled out to the masses, and it interestingly very quickly changed from buy them, become energy independent, to rent them from these companies. And then it's just, you're right back in the cycle of paying your bill. Like, it's the same game. So it's like, I'm worried if this is real and something we could use, that it will very quickly be co-opted by convenience. We'll let the government dole these out to you, and then you have to pay your free energy tax or whatever, however this works. And that's the opposite, right? And that's how I always worry about where these go. And, it's, again, I'm very obviously pessimistic when it comes to these things, but I leave the open door for the possibility this is just a good thing for the right reasons. But, even those things tend to be co-opted by people that want to abuse us,
Absolutely. And this is out of, I mean, I don't know what the money behind the Western Standard online website is. I really don't. I don't know who's pushing it. It could be a native ad for somebody. It could be a native ad for the lithium industry, like you're saying, where they're trying to squeeze people out. So there can be one big push and capture for it. I honestly don't know. What I do know, though, is that like the potential for, and if we're talking about it, should at least get people who are curious on new and better forms of energy. I don't even want to use the word sustainable because they made it a dirty word. But I mean, it's just like, it should spark a little bit more curiosity. And hopefully if it leads people to discover ways that we can, create, harness, and channel energy, power some things with less destruction overall, less corporate capture overall, this is something that could lead to a significant amount of increase in liberty, if at all, if it's feasible. So even if this is effectively bullshit, it would hopefully spark some of the more inventive people who are hearing about it to see if they could field test it. That would ultimately be. I'm trying to be a good finder, buddy. I am.
That's a good point. I'm gonna have to jump off, but I'll leave you with one point here, and you guys to chat. Is that it's certainly. I mean, if this comes out and we get to see how this is done, that's questionable. Like literally see how how the pieces fall together, and we realize, wait a minute, they've had the ability, the know-how, and the technological advancement to do this for 50 years. We need to ask why it's getting rolled out now. You know what I mean? Because the way it's sounding. It sounds like you could probably prove that they've known how to do this for a long time. And that's just an odd question. Like, why now? Something to think about. But it's good to see you again, Jay. And I'll let you guys chat. I have to go to another appointment. So
cool.
For sure, Ryan.
Thanks, guys. Happy Teal Lab Tuesday.
Yes, sir. Always a pleasure, my friend. Make sure you're checking out thelastAmericanVagabond.com for all of your Last American Vagabond needs. Yeah. I suck at marketing, by the way. I really do.
Well, everything's energy, right? I mean, energy control is the name of the game in the sense of, if you think about all life, you know, the monetary system, they're all ways of capturing and capitalizing on and controlling energy flows. I mean, controlling the markets is also controlling energy. Controlling what you eat is controlling energy. So, you know, if we think about the moves that they've had to ban cars, they want to ban gas stoves, they want to bring in euthanasia, death care. That's also a form of ending your energy going on inside of you. Banning meat, making you eat bugs, banning travel, stabbies, controlling you through, you know, vaccine passports and nanotech, all that kind of stuff. Ending the family, that's ending you producing more beings that run on energy. You know, Agenda 21, like you mentioned, all that stuff, Agenda 2030, the Bush Rio stuff, UN Diversity Project, Rewilding Project, 15-minute cities, ESG, that's all energy control. So that's definitely, if there is a free energy source, that would be enemy number one.
No, that's a very valid point. And I always try to make an additional point that when they talk about carbon elimination, ultimately the carbon they want to eliminate is us because we're the useless eaters.
Exactly.
What is it? Sustainable Development Goals laid out by the UN. We had Corey Morningstar on my other show over the weekend. She laid out a whole presentation because she's trying to get people on the left to understand why the World Economic Forum may not be their best friends. It was a fantastic presentation. She did just a killer freaking job. And the SDGs are effectively the complete commodification of nature. What SDGs effectively mean are we're going to find new markets for everything that lives, and then we're going to capture it. We're going to eliminate what is natural about it, and we're going to rent it back to you, or we're going to sell some of it to you through a virtual experience.
Yeah, circular economy.
Yeah. It's and to get people to understand this, Jay, is that I don't know, man. For some reason, it's fucking rocket surgery, and I don't know why. I really don't. Overall, though, I think that it's most people are just so invested in their own political polarization.
Yeah, exactly.
That they don't want to see past it.
But don't you think that those freaking anti-capitalists would grab a hold of this thing and really say, look, they're trying to commodify every single bit of nature out there? Shouldn't that seem logical in their minds? I don't understand why they are pushing back against that when that's the theory and why they hate the capitalist system so much. It's like, well, aren't you seeing what they're doing here? That's the thing I can't understand. And it was the thing I couldn't understand when it came to the COVID-19 protocols. I'm like, guys, the people that you were out in the streets marching against and complaining about and say they were the worst people in the world are now the people you're taking advice from for your health, that you're allowing to put a shot into your system. And they're the same people when you go all the way down, when you go down the rabbit hole or you look into it in a more nuanced manner and you look at the receipts, they're the same people waging wars all over the fucking planet. How can you not see this shit? That's the thing that blows my mind.
I think there's a lot of fear and pride involved in that, because fear in the sense that if you admit one of these things, like you're saying, that would mean that essentially the entire paradigm that you believe is wrong and you've been duped. And then, you know, there's a inability of humans to want to admit that they've been wrong. So they have a lot of pride and they're invested in this. And so they're kind of emotionally attached to the cult that they've default sort of become a participant in. And it's very difficult to, if you look at the psychology and the testimonies of people that leave cults, it's very similar to the people that leave, you know, these mainline political ideologies, because it's pride and it's a fear and an emotional attachment to these things, which they're just, like you said, control mechanisms. And you would think that it would be logical, but you know, humans don't operate solely on the basis of logic. There's a lot of emotional attachment involved.
I think the old trick And the old tactic of divide and conquer is still what's keeping everything in a line. That they've found a way to make sure that you blame your neighbor for shit more than anything else. It's still that mentality, at least from what I see in the States. It's still, oh my God, that guy is anti-trans, that guy is, anti-gay, that guy is, a Nazi, that sort of thing. I think that's where they've been successful. So the fact that they had TDS and they rolled right into CDS, right? It worked masterfully. It was like, oh my God, what are you, a Trumper? You don't want to take the shot? I'm like, no, asshole. I thought it was big pharma that we couldn't stand. We couldn't hate, right? Now they're benevolent all of a sudden. I mean, it doesn't make sense to me.
It's the amount of mental and emotional and spiritual capital that people have poured into an ideology that largely constructed by people who hate them, I think is really what's keeping people locked in that, and recognizing that you've made a bad investment and then getting yourself out of it is one of the most difficult things that you can possibly do. Ask anyone who's been an addict. The amount of physical, emotional, and spiritual capital, mental capital that you pour into an addiction is massive, man. And to walk away from that, for most people, usually really, really difficult. This is effectively the same. All of the same synapses are firing in this process, and most of it now is all the dopamine addicts getting little hits and wherever they can there. And again, you guys, dopamine costs money in some way, shape, or form. Serotonin is free every single time. Oxytocin, free every single time. But the people that want you on a digital currency or want you hooked into the X app now, because it's the X app, because we're getting one step closer to Western WeChat, where your whole entire life is going to be ran through your X app. Just like Elon Musk said he wanted to do and was what totally wanted to do with Twitter. Like we told you. I'm surprised. I'm sorry, I'm getting a little off track because holy shit, dude, that guy really did. He told you, I would like to make Twitter into the X app, and we would like to reverse engineer WeChat, and we would like to make it so that your entire existence is contained within this, including all of your financial information, all of your transactions, and all of the biometric security that comes along with it. Yeah, that's where we're at with Twitter right now. But hey, you can make fun of liberals again.
So says Rumble.
Big win. Big win.
Man. So what else is going on? Jay, you getting ready for this event coming up? What do you think about it? Rebels with
I
a
think
cause.
it's going to be fun. I mean, the stuff we do live is kind of weird. It's different than what we typically do. So I think it's going to be fun. Looking forward to seeing what you guys are going to be doing. What do you think you guys are going to do? Can you spill some deets?
See, now I'm a little embarrassed because I had a whole Gallagher-esque routine plan, but I'm gonna have to scrap it. I'm gonna have to start from square one all over again. The R.I.P. Gallagher.
Yeah.
But I haven't actually sat down to decide. Got a couple of months to figure it out. I wanted to do a live podcast here while we were in Vegas, and I'm still here. Pasta's back in Florida, but I haven't figured out what to do, like on a stage, live staged podcast.
Yeah.
As a stage show. I don't know. We'll figure it out, man. We'll figure it out. I have a feeling that at least at this event, we'll be able to incorporate some multimedia and hopefully bring a few folks out and have just a rip snorting good old time.
Yeah. I proposed something to Scott, and Scott liked the idea, and he's going to talk to Courtney about it. So we'll see. There might be a somewhat of a performance from me, but we'll see. You know what I'm saying?
Pasta's got 3 different one-man shows that he's been trying to get.
I got one man show that I've been working on behind closed doors and behind the scenes, and I might be able to perform. It might be ready the first act of it. The first it's a 3-act play performed by me. Obviously, I wanted to use the power and the ability to have TV screens and video to combine with it on elections. So I might be able to perform the first one if I get the go ahead, something over there, because kind of meets the
Is it
theme.
really one? Are you joking? Or are you being serious? Really? Is it really a one-man act?
Yeah, it's really. I'm serious about it. It's like a 1-man play, 3-act 1-man play where I play 3 different characters, and it's about elections. So, and the first act is the election professor, elections 101. So, and it's interactive with the audience and, the whole 9 yards. I have 3 different characters I wanted to play and kind of lay it on out. I thought it'd be just a cool way to, explain elections and talk about elections and get it out there and be entertaining to get people more involved with the election system, because that is important to me. I believe the only way to national sovereignty is with free and fair elections. So, and I don't begrudge anybody, my Fiorella, my partner, Steve. I was on Misty Winston's show yesterday. They're done with electoral politics. They understand why play into a system that is so far fucked up. Well, I want to point out the areas that are far and fucked up and try to correct them, as best we can. I dream of the people actually one day having power, because I don't believe we've ever had power. I've always believed that our election systems for maybe since our conception have always been fake. And the people that we have in office now are selected, obviously not elected. And I believe that's a way we can take control and get change if we had fair elections. Now, there are many other things we have to deal with, the propaganda, the way media is run, and all that 9 yards. But, that's just one aspect of what's going on. Going to see elections in other countries like Nicaragua, Honduras, Colombia, Peru, and Brazil, it's amazing when you see them play out. So, yeah. All right.
It's
Don't everybody
fun.
speak at once.
I was getting shouted at.
You think I'm crazy, Jay? I don't know.
I haven't thought about elections in a long time. I'm trying to remember last time I voted. It was a long time ago. I'm not trying to be a douchebag or shut down the whole thing. I mean, I think at a local level, you can do a lot with that kind of stuff. I just haven't really paid attention to the national elections, other than because it's like everybody talks about that. It becomes this huge, it's like sports, right? I mean, sports is like another idle thing that people are all into, and to me, it's kind of ridiculous. Maybe I'm just too black-pilled from, like, if you read a bunch of how the CIA stories of how they like throw the elections in all the other countries, it's like, well, they did the same thing in our country, so
yeah. Well, they do it easier over here. They have more mechanisms in which they can cheat over here because, Americans are way more naive to what's going on.
Yeah, exactly.
Well, a naive, apathetic, intentionally distracted, intentionally divided. It's a shit show. It is, for sure. We're not to the point to where we have to do a national SIM card registry like the Philippines yet, though. Did you guys see any of that? Mm-hmm. Even this is, I want to bring this up while we're all here. Come here, fucker. So in the Philippines, they're about to do a mass deactivation of all of their cell phones for the people who haven't complied with the mandatory SIM card registration drive. That's right. In a scramble to avoid a mass disconnection that could also affect users' access to banking and other digital services, Department of Information and Communications Technology is looking at creative ways to sign up as many people as possible. So they're not in any way, shape, or form walking away from mandatory SIM card registration. They need to get 111 million out of roughly 169 million SIM cards registered. And one way to accelerate the registration process is for local executives to help public telecoms and other concerned sectors establish more offsite centers where people can sign up. Yeah, the next step is they're going to send the same people around that have been taking care of the drug dealer problem in the Philippines to register your SIM card. That's good stuff. That's some overtly totalitarian shit. And this is one of Donnie John Trump's like heroes there, the president of the Philippines. He loves that guy, what they're doing.
There's a really good book by Servando Gonzalez called Psychological Warfare and the New World Order. He's got a whole bunch of chapters and sections early on in the text where he talks about governments and coups and staging and rigging elections and how this was done in so many different countries. So I guess when you read that kind of stuff, it kind of makes you think, like, I mean, this even the whole idea that I'm talking about national elections, I'm not talking about local elections. I mean, the idea that, like, I'm gonna vote for some guy, some bureaucrat, 500 miles away that has nothing to do with me, my interests, anything like that. Just the whole process is kind of ludicrous. To me, it seems like it's built on this, Enlightenment idea of the informed citizen. And that was a certain idealized view of what everybody could be from coming out of the Enlightenment. Like we could all aspire to be sort of a Thomas Jefferson or a Ben Franklin or something like this. And that's not the reality of human beings, I don't think. I think human beings are fitted to different jobs. They're fitted to specific things. You're never going to get a farmer who has to spend all this time farming, being an expert statesman. There might be a person out there who can be an expert farmer and a statesman at the same time or something, but that's very, very rare. So the idea that we can idealize these things, to me, is just kind of fiction and fantasy, and it's part of that Enlightenment LARPing that is not the reality of human nature. Humans are typically focused on the areas that they have gifts in, and there's very few human beings that have gifts in every area. So, the guy who's the tailor is not going to understand French geopolitics and should we go to war with France. You know what I mean? It's not in the 1700s or whatever. It's not. It just doesn't make any sense to have this idea of the informed citizen. So that's the presupposition of national elections.
Yeah. Well, there's that, and then the reality is that either from inception or at least for the last, 150, 200 years, politicians have been absolutely nothing more than rented fucking mules for oligarchs, and I've said it before. The crass way to put it is that your elected representatives are whores, and like good whores, they fuck you after you pay them. So you give them your time and your resources and your energy, and they fuck you. That's what they do. But the time and the energy and the resources, the money, that all goes to a pimp. They get to keep some of it, but you don't necessarily get to see who the pimp is. And if you try to complain or talk about the pimp, that's when you get smacked down by everybody else, because nobody's supposed to acknowledge that these whores are just out here fucking. You could try and buy a new one every couple of years. You try a new one out every election season if you want to, but at the end of the day, you're still giving them your money to fuck you, and they're going to take that money and they're going to give it to their pimp. And that's politics. And at the local level, you've got a whole bunch of, at least in a number of cities, people that are intrinsic to the military industrial complex who have business concerns in, if not the city, the county. And then so you're still competing at the same level with the same corporate interests, the same spooked up entities, the number of defense contractors, and say they're a Lockheed Martin or a Raytheon or a Boeing or whatever in a ton of different major cities that are usually county seats. Or usually next to it, where they're able to influence local elections too. It honestly, at this point, if anybody wants to do their community a solid, take over your entire sheriff's department. Take over the entire thing. Because not only do you have people that are running the protection racket for the state now, you can siphon off of their funds. You could effectively, realistically, shore up your community pretty well by capturing your local sheriff's department. But I mean, I would recommend that rather than going through the electoral route personally, even though usually sheriff is an elected position in a lot of places.
Exactly.
If you can get your dude in, sure, do that. They did it in Mendocino County. Working out all right for them, too. They also kicked the Masons out of a couple of towns in Mendocino County. Sent them packing.
Really?
Yeah.
Huh.
Yeah. The lodge in Willits is vacant. And then there's a couple other lodges right around there that are now just abandoned fucking buildings.
Wow, that's crazy.
Yeah.
I've never heard of that. Yeah. I mean, there was an anti-Masonic party back in the 1800s. Have you heard of that?
I don't know a lot about it, but I've seen a handful of different references to it.
Yeah, there was networks of corruption, that were kind of discovered back then, and they had the the death of, I think, William Morgan, which led to the anti-Masonic party, and it didn't last very long. But yeah, there was at one point an entire political party just anti-Mason, but yeah, I think I don't know, the whole psychology of elections is really weird. It's just in America, it's its own sport, as you know. It's sort of WWF, but I don't know. The whole idea is ludicrous to me.
What is the solution?
I think it makes sense on a local level. I'm talking about just national elections. I think are silly.
I mean, they're a consent ritual at this point. That's all it is. But I mean, you know me, dude. I'm anti-state. So I think that, if you can have consensus on particular tasks, because there's always going to be tasks that need to be done. There's always going to be people who are naturally better suited to be, to take a lead role in accomplishing those tasks. Based on skill or based on acquired knowledge, whatever. There are always going to be people that are more suited to be the leader of any specific project. But in terms of a national government, over 330 million people with very, very disparate backgrounds, ideology, all that kind of stuff, there's just a one-size-fits-all solution is insane. And I don't, it's not like necessarily national divorce that I'm advocating for, because that just gives you microsystems of the same corrupt system. I've said for I don't know how long that until we can figure out a way to heal, we can't do shit. But our reward for stopping the technocratic panopticon is the ability and the opportunity to determine our future going forward. And if people can't recognize that as a reward of this instant gratification culture of spoiled, pampered little shits can't see that, we're definitely screwed.
Yeah. But I mean, if we're going to have a national government and there are going to be people making decisions nationally, shouldn't we have more say, an actual transparent say in what and who should be selected? I mean, if it was, wouldn't that be better for us? I mean, I can understand the importance of concentrating more on a local level. And I think that's also by design, that people do not concentrate on a local level. You talk to somebody in a certain area, they can tell you who where their offensive lineman for their favorite football team went to school, when he was drafted, all that shit, but they don't know their local councilman, and they don't know their local, representative. They don't even know their state congressperson for the most part. And that is something that I wish that we can get back in to play. Civics need to be taught in schools. A lot of people on the populist right want elections to be taught at schools. And I think that's great too as well. But I mean, if there is going to be a national government, shouldn't we push for a more transparent way of choosing those people? I mean, there's going to still be hurdles to go over, but wouldn't we want
Yes,
more of a say?
abolish the CIA. Yes, abolish the Bank of International Settlements. Yes, abolish the Federal Reserve. Yes, abolish the FBI. Yes, abolish the
And
NSA.
we want to
Because
abolish those things, right? So we
all
need,
none of the election shit happens without those things going away. Because that's the apparatus that's controlling the elections. The government is the theater we get to see while the control is taking
but
place.
the way the change is it from the inside out, no, not from outside in.
That's what political reformists have argued for the last couple hundred years of lesser evilism. Yes, you're correct.
That's a way. I mean, you say abolish all these things. How do we abolish them?
Well, I would say the old-fashioned way, which isn't voting
With a hammer,
the economic
Gallagher
warfare.
style.
Economic warfare. We wage economic warfare. These people are tied to a false currency issued by a bunch of kid diddling fucking demon worshipers. We don't have to believe in it. We don't have to. This is a choice that we're making each and every day to submit our will and to submit our lives and our ability to sustain our livelihoods to this nebulous fake fucking dollar. We don't have to do that. We can have a counter economy. There's people who have been screaming about it for decades, who are putting forward a number of different ways that we can do this. We don't get to, I don't know if we get to do it traditional warfare style, but I do believe that economic warfare is probably the most likely way that we of course in conjunction with a number of other things, but as a central focus, on the economic front, that's where it's going to have to happen.
Yeah.
But I'm spitballing
it's possible
here.
that there is, maybe a national candidate that would want to start doing those things. You know what I'm saying? That would want to start abolishing the CIA. I know
There was Adam Kokesh. I was a delegate for him a number of years ago but he wasn't actually a candidate. He was just somebody who was running in the Libertarian Party.
Yeah.
I don't know. But I mean, he was on a ballot nationally. So it counts. But yeah, I mean, he wanted to abolish the federal government within 72 hours of being elected president. That was a platform I could get behind.
A lot of people in the chat are asking about the Aldous Huxley stuff that Jay was getting into.
Oh, that was fascinating, man.
A lot of, yeah.
That was a fun talk. I enjoyed that. If you would like, you want to give the audience a little overview of what happened. Yeah, I dig talking about Aldous and Julian.
Yeah, we did a chapter by chapter breakdown of the entire Brave New World text with my buddy, Quite Frankly TV, and that was a lot of fun because I hadn't looked at the book in about 6 years, and going back and looking at it, there was all kinds of elements that I overlooked. And quite a few Crowleyan themes that were present in the text that I didn't notice until this time around. And there was some, I think, discourse between the two of them, or some influence between the two of them, because both of them obviously had connections to British intelligence. Crowley was for a while a British intelligence asset. And I did an interview with the guy who wrote the biography of Crowley about his spy work, Dr. Richard Spence, and he noted that probably Crowley's drug diaries might have actually influenced Huxley and others to come up with the idea of MK Ultra, or the proto version of it in the UK. And so I think that when you read Brave New World, you realize this is actually a kind of an infantilized aeon of the child kind of era that Crowley talked about. And Huxley makes it very clear in the introduction. The copy I have, there's an introduction from Huxley. And he says that, this is not really fiction. It's fiction, but it's presenting the real plan. And you get into this situation where in the novel, it's supposed to be the year 2500, but I think it takes place basically now. The guy who's the world socialist controller, he's one of 10 world socialist technocrats. And he suppresses scientific advancements, like you're talking about with the free energy earlier. Everything that's true and beneficial for humanity is actually suppressed, because he says that you can't have aesthetics, beauty, and freedom without exchanging that for security. So the entire thing is about control and everybody being placated by their base passions. So everything is geared towards pleasure. And Huxley says that the great part is that he gave these famous Berkeley speeches, which a lot of people forget about, where he says in 1962, 30 years after the book, that it's not fiction. It's all what we're going to do to you. And the audience is just sitting there, laughing and giggling as he's saying, we're going to do this to you. So, it's just phenomenal to me. It's another one of those classic examples of Revelation, the method, where they tell you what they're doing. They tell you what we're going to do. People are just sitting there, just sort of eating it up, and they can't get that he's literally saying this is a plan to enslave everybody. And there's all these other elements I forgot too in the speech, where he says that we'll utilize, very influential, charismatic speakers and thinkers, and the way that an evangelical preacher or pastor kind of manipulates and controls his audience will become the model for how we will manipulate and control everybody into this cult. He actually describes it as a cult. So the technocratic situation that everybody will be submitting to, he's saying, is not something based on science, reason, logic. It's a manipulated cult reality. And as we were talking about earlier about people in terms of voting and people, why don't they understand that Davos and World Economic Forum don't have their interests? And it's because of what Huxley talks about. He says that we've mastered the technique and the science of social and psychological manipulation through pleasure, through promising people the exchange of liberty for security. That's literally what Mustafa Aman says in the novel. They have these debates over, how and why are you doing this, and what is the means and method of control that you have? And he says that we basically just promised everybody infinite pleasure, and that's the best way to enslave people, is through the promise of pleasure. So basically, government doled out pleasure, right, is your enslavement. And that's exactly what all the technocratic stuff is. Everything to do with our cell phones and everything to do with the internet, all of that is, if you give us everything in terms of your own personal data and your own liberty, you in exchange will get ease and convenience. So that's the trade-off, and that's the whole novel's about. It's also about all this other stuff that we talked about too, about energy control, right? We're talking about, you don't have kids, you don't have offspring, you don't eat your own food, all of that. I mean, it's all in the novel, and it's 100% a plan, because he's in the circles of all the people who actually planned this, as you guys know.
Yep. And there's such a direct line between exactly what's discussed in Brave New World and the effective altruism as a concept that we've seen emerge through a lot of the tech billionaires. SBF was one of these guys, where they've taken what is effectively a significantly Malthusian worldview and flipped it, all dialectically, basically, and made it the inverse into, this is an altruistic mindset.
Well, he says at the beginning of the novel, in the introduction, that it's utilitarianism. So it's Jeremy Bentham's Enlightenment utilitarianism, and utilitarianism has this idea of the greatest pleasure for the greatest number of people. And the effective altruism that you're talking about was just another kind of Silicon Valley cult version of Bentham's utilitarianism. And Bentham was a fan of panopticism. And if you look at the old ideas of panopticism coming out of the French Revolution, that's a mechanism of control. It's a prison system, actually, where there's a guard tower and you believe you're under 24/7 surveillance. That's the 24/7 surveillance state that we're going into. It's an engineered and designed thing. And that's something Bentham realized. But by the way, somebody's trying to challenge me on YouTube about this. No, Bentham was an employee of the British East India Company. And so the British East India Company also pioneered all these other strategies of control, like opium war. Maybe we've heard of this, fentanyl, this kind of stuff, right? That's an old British imperial strategy of control. And the structure that runs our world today, the Fabian, Milner, Rhodes, Rothschild society, right? That comes out of the British East India Company, the British South Africa Company, which is a corporate secret society that Cecil Rhodes set up. So he modeled it on the Jesuits. He modeled it on Freemasonry, created his own little secret society under a corporate structure that would then be the model for how to bring America back under the influence of the British Empire. And then by extension, eventually gets us to where we are now. It's the same entity that runs the world now. And it's the same people behind Brave New World, the Fabian Socialists, et cetera, that are allied with monopoly capital. So that's why people can't figure out what's going on, because they're like you said earlier, they're still trapped in thinking, oh, if you're a free market, then you believe in you believe in business. The Fortune 100, Fortune 500, that's free market. No, it's not. Right. It's the Fortune 100, Fortune 500. They promote the exact same thing globally. That is the policy of the UN, the CDC, the Gates Foundation, the Rockefeller Foundation, because it's one entity. It's the same control structure. So it's not a question of private property and free markets versus government control and regulations. It's a monopoly corporate control of government that uses Fabian socialism.
Guys, I'm so sorry. Really quickly, I'm going to ditch on out. My mother's got a thing she's got to go to, and I want to drive her. She's not feeling too well. So I don't want her going out on her own. It's really windy out here, but I just want to say thanks, Shay, for coming on. I'm looking forward to meet you in person in June. And thanks for holding it down, Steve. I love you guys, and I'll speak to you soon. Did you have anything else, brother, before I get on out, Steve?
Take care, buddy. You go do your thing. Tell Mom hi.
I will.
All right.
She loved the show yesterday watching it. She's like, wow, Steve's got a great way of explaining things. I'm like, yeah, Ma, why haven't you been watching the show? And she always says it's too advanced for her. And I said, well, that's why I pulled the Michael Scott. Like, I do the whole thing. Well, explain it to me as if I'm a fourth grader. And Steve's like, well, pretend you have a lemonade stand. So love you guys. Have a great one. Jay, nice speaking to you. I'll see you soon, guys.
All right. Well, shit, man. I was gonna say, with the JP Morgan's running around talking about banks need to seize private. So this is exactly correlating with what you're talking about and what we're discussing. I don't know if I'm sure you saw the Jamie Dimon thing. Mm-hmm. But the blatancy, I guess, if that's even a fucking word, I don't know.
It should be. It's a new word now.
Right. Yeah, just the smacking people in the face with how over the top authoritarian all of these corporate CEOs are. I don't know, almost like it's almost like they're a bunch of fucking Trotskyites running around.
Yeah, I was going to say it's very similar to the Bolshevik methodology, the way that they would just sort of seize property, seize things, and say, it's kind of like reparations ideology, right? Like, your ancestors unfairly seized this, and so we're seizing it back, and so it's just legalized theft, basically, is all it is. But I mean, socialism, communism is itself based on envy, right? It's a whole philosophy of I have the right to steal from you because I can come up with some way in which some of your ancestors stole from my ancestors somehow. It's all very arbitrary and inconsistent. But yeah, exactly. Like the regimes, it doesn't matter whether it's the facade of democracy, which we have now, which is basically a front for international capital and the Fortune 100, or whether it's fascism, or whether it's Bolshevism, Menshevism. Well, it doesn't matter, because they all do the exact same thing. They just come into power and seize everything and say, oh, that's ours, by the way. And you got it by theft when they're stealing. So wait a minute. If stealing is wrong, then how are you stealing again to make it, like, there's two wrongs make a right? Right. It's like theft is bad, so we're going to steal from you.
We have the death penalty because you need to kill people to show people that killing people is wrong. So in the same way, you've got, we've got to steal from you. We've got to steal from you because we said you stole from us. So we've got to prove that you can't do that by stealing back or stealing again. It's not only is it like super childish, but it's such an easy ideology to get out into the concept of just idiot freaking college students. And I say that with all love because, I know a handful of them that are my son's age that are getting ready to go to college, and boy, are they idiots. Boy, are they idiots. But they're lovable. They are. And I think that they have a bright future ahead of them because most of them seem to be a little bit more resistant to a lot of the messaging. That is something that I've noticed, at least in terms of, young adults or about to become young adults, is that in as much as there's a massive propaganda operation and a complete culture capture that has taken place, there are sizable pockets of resistance and refutation all over the place. And at least where my kids are right now, the even the public school systems weren't going any kind of super woke, super mask crazy. The school system that they live in actually pushed back against a bunch of the mandates and the bullshit, and they were like, well, okay, on paper all of this applies, but in the classroom it's up to the individual teacher. We would ask you to respect your teacher, but it's up to them whether or not you put on the diaper, you do any of the Hail Fauci's or whatever you got to do to get through the day. And I know that there's stuff like this happening all over. I know that there are schools that are being piloted, and I know that there are programs that have been in place for ongoing education of young people that don't rely on state mandated whims, dictates, and the fucking suicidal ideology. So that's at least
good. No, I didn't know that. I mean, I know there's a lot of homeschooling and that kind of stuff, but college seems to me to be kind of a captured institution. Like universities are pretty much, just brainwashing factories. And I was there not too long ago, and it was really bad in the 2000s. When I was trying to do grad work and all that. And so I can imagine how crazy it is now. You see these people screaming on the campuses and just kind of losing their mind, but they were really pushing and promoting and kind of provoking and agitprop kind of stuff going on in the 2000s to kind of increase this agitation on campuses, for a long time. So I'm not surprised that it's kind of gotten to whipped up into this fervor that it's at now, where people go to, I was thinking of the Alex Stein videos where he went to, I think, Pittsburgh or Pennsylvania, and they were all just kind of attacking him. And I mean, it's going to get completely insane. Like it's I think around 2016, right? Trump was kind of like the switch that flipped, that started turning a lot of these, activists and these completely mind controlled college level people, really turned them violent. They started going crazy. Whereas prior to that, there wasn't a whole lot of violence. It was more so just the screaming and the irrationality. And now it's turned into like just straight on like demonic possession, with people like foaming at the mouth and just yelling and barking. And I don't know if you saw the video of all the people who identify as other things barking for like 20 minutes. It's just like, we're full on like demonic possession. It makes me think of the scenes in Twin Peaks, like when Bobby goes to jail and he just starts barking for like 20 minutes. They said that Trotsky, Lenin did that too. Like he would just bark and howl at the moon in the latter days of his life, because he basically went insane. I mean, that's where we're going. So the society's collapsing. People are going insane. And, the idea, I think, that people like you and me and others have to kind of be as self-sufficient off the grid as possible is really the best things that we can do at this point.
I agree. We have what appears to be, and I don't want to sound like doom and gloom or alarmist or anything like that, but we have what appears to be a relatively small window in terms of years to sort of establish trade networks, support networks, mutual aids, stuff like that. And we had the great Gerald Salenti on a few months back, and Gerald was like, look, man, there's people that are going to go along with the bullshit no matter what. There's those of us who understand what's going on are at least trying to inform or push back on it. But we've done most of the informing that we could ever possibly do. We need to organize with the people who already know what's going on, because it's the soft void in the middle that needs to be swayed. And they're only going to be swayed if they can see a working model of something that isn't a digital prison. And that's, we can't be concerned about as much the status quo, because we have a fuck ton of work to do. And one of the things that we're at least trying to do here on the show and have done, and I know that Corbett has been doing a wonderful job with the solutions series that he has, just, you know, keep having conversations with people who are already doing shit and who already have some workable solutions, who already have, I need to go track down the guy, but I've talked about this a lot before. With running water in a stream and a decommissioned washing machine and a battery bank, you can power your house on passive solar just by the drum spinning and charging up the battery. Like, there's a number of different workable short-term to mid-term solutions that people can do to remove themselves even a little bit more, you know, every day or every month, every 6 months from this oncoming technocratic state. And it's one of those things where you have to write the shit down, and you have to set goals, and you have to keep yourself accountable, and you have to work towards it. I think it was with you on Rich's panel a month or so ago, when we were kind of talking about the university system, and one of the end results of that was Rich offered my 17-year-old kid the autonomy course to audit for season 9. So he's doing that now, and he's a junior in high school getting a full-on education. He's getting all of his unlearning and his relearning all at once, and he was already pretty far ahead of the curve as far as that went anyway. But I feel like we really dodged a bullet on him getting sucked into a university system that he wasn't going to be any kind of comfortable in the first place. Stoked on that bit.
Yeah, I think you know, when I was there, I was doing grad work, and I was going to try to get a PhD, and they brought in the guy that was the head of the department. It was fairly new, if I recall. He had studied at the London School of Economics, and they brought him in, and he was a huge promoter and supporter of the United Nations. And what I learned was that they don't really want you kind of going up in that structure to get a PhD, because it's ultimately part of the control system, unless you are going along with all of the ideology that the university system teaches, which is again linked into that United Nations global model. And so, you know, just to meet and see a lot of these goobers in person, you know, at that level, not anybody super famous, but just people like at the local level that were hooked into this, you know, global United Nations structure. It's very bizarre, but you can sense that, you know, the academic structure is ultimately part of this legacy system. And that's what I'm really happy to see Richard doing with Grand Theft World and Autonomy University, is kind of beginning to move away from the legacy system that's a control structure towards actually competing and having better models of education where people actually learn stuff and not brainwashed. But I can assure you 100%, there's actually many books on this beyond just the Charlotte Iserbyt book. I mean, the education system, the old legacy system, is 100% a control structure. The whole university system was really structured by the older intelligence networks and apparatus anyway. So that this is where we get the predecessor actually to the OSS was the inquiry under Wilson. And the inquiry was just a bunch of academics. And this is, you know, this eventually leads to the OSS, which is drug runners, admin, psyops people, and academics, and Wall Street people. So that's the new incarnation after the inquiry of OSS. Then that becomes CIA, and it's all the above. So that's a key element in the control structure has always been education. We all know about media. That's obviously Mockingbird, all that stuff. Yeah. But education is huge too. And there's been, quite a few books written on the connections between the education system and the intelligence world. It's a recruiting ground. It's a control structure. So that, I just, I really wanted to be a professor. I was so set on that. And when you get to where you put a whole bunch of money and time and effort into this, and you realize that you're not actually welcome in this unless you go along with this. Yeah. And to me, it was heartbreaking, but at the same time, I'm glad it all happened. I'm glad to see that was a big, scam system, because I would have sunk $100,000 into getting PhD. To do what? To sit there and talk to like 30 people or 20 people every semester. Why would I do that? You can talk to millions of people through the internet. You can teach your own courses where you're not teaching a determined structure that a board of education decides, which is part of the brainwashing. Like, they pick the text, and now they pick the texts that are the woke texts, right? By design, right? So
when you were going through graduate and deciding whether or not to get the PhD and all that, were you at the time like the same sort of Orthodox religious that you are now? Has that been a process? Were you not religious at all? Like, did that have an impact on what you were doing?
I had typically had religious views. I started getting interested in Orthodox Christianity in 2007. So I was doing grad work back then. That's when I first started grad school, but I was working full time. So that's why it took me so long to do a lot of this, is that I would work 35 hours and then go do grad classes after work. So, yeah, I had at least some kind of religious perspective for most of the time period where I was doing undergrad and grad work.
Because there's a couple of different camps where it comes to recognizing what Schwab now calls the new global governance, or whatever that is. And I have noticed that over the years, it along with basically dope smoking hippies, it's deeply religious people who agree 100% on all of this stuff and where it's originating from and who it's actually, who a lot of the key players are and what most of the core concepts are. So I was curious as to, if that had any sort of impact in the recognition of what was going on within academia or the university system as a whole. And especially in terms of the, I guess, UN sycophants that seem to populate that system. The Bohemian Club, before it was even Bohemian Grove, was one of those things that was originated in academia and the arts. And that was what, the 1880s, 70s, something like that.
Yeah, I think that's a great point. You see on both the East Coast and the West Coast the same structure of, really wealthy families and elites being involved directly in the concocting and creating of the education systems. So on the West Coast, like you said, you have like that Bohemian crowd in San Francisco, and this is where we get the Bohemian Club and Bohemian Grove. And on the East Coast, you get, Yale, Harvard, Princeton. These are all created by these old line wealthy families that go back to the establishment of the colonies. And that's the Eastern Seaboard elite that, Quigley and all these people write so much about. But they set up the structures like, the secret society networks that become the basis for the recruitment of OSS and CIA. Exactly. So you don't go into that from, Yale and Harvard and Princeton if you're not part of Scroll and Key, Skull and Bones, Wolf's Head, or whatever. All of those, that becomes the grounds for the recruitment into further and further structures. And that is itself a filtering mechanism to make sure that you get the most devious, the most compromisable, right? If you watch that movie Good Shepherd, that's based on exactly what we're talking about, where you got to be pissed on as you roll through a bunch of mud first. Then you got to confess all your sexual proclivities to your brothers. Then you got to do this, and that allows you to be, recruited into the next level. And so there's actual books, historians of intelligence stuff have linked this too and called it a cult. the cult of intelligence.
Yeah. And I mean, if you look at when they retire, they write stuff, the way that they even talk about it, the reverence, especially if they're still pro, the reverence that they hold for the institutions behind the institution, the sort of awe in which they'll discuss their work, their mission, all of this sort of thing. It is there's a religious fervor to it, without a doubt. We've seen a bunch of interviews with I mean, even Ray McGovern, who's been away from it for 30 years, very much opposed to the way the intelligence community has conducted itself over the years. There's still almost like this, again, I'm going to fall back on the word, but I reverence for it because of the way that you're brought up into it. It's very, very, I don't know. I mean, it's ingenious when you think about it in terms of a filtering mechanism and a way to make sure that you're going to have, if not loyalists, sufficiently self-serving, devious bastards who are going to be able to get the job done.
Yeah, cacostocracy, like Corbis says. I mean, it's like, this model, I was just reading about some other examples where they were doing the exact same thing as what we see with Epstein, right? The Epstein compromise model, actually very similar to the Franklin cover-up compromise model with Craig Spence. And I was reading several books recently on Gladio and the Vatican and that whole bank scandal and how that compromise model worked with the P2 Lodge in Italy, which was actually run by like Kissinger and the CIA. That the P2 compromise model is the exact same as what was Epstein's compromise model. So then you start to realize that they just do the exact same thing. This is the same system where it's like, okay, you're going to be, we invite you to the party, then we bring you to the back room, the after party, like R. Kelly talks about, right? Then in the after party, there's a two-way mirror and we've got you on tape doing this or that. And then basically you're told, this is what they did with P2. They were like, now you join our secret society. And if you don't join the secret society, then everybody knows what you did in the back room at the after party. If you do, now you're committed to doing what we tell you to do. And if you don't, you end up either dead or exposed. And that's the model they run over and over and over. And I guess that's the point of Whitney Webb's book, right? I mean, but I mean, I don't know if she talks. I have it. I haven't read it yet. I just got it a couple of weeks ago, but I don't know if she talks about the Vatican bank model. I'm just pointing out that when I was reading the Gladio text recently, I just noticed it's the same model of control.
Well, and we've been repeating Operation Gladio all over the place for the last 30, 40 years. It was effectively what's going on in Ukraine right now.
Yeah, you that's through the Galen org, Otto Skorzeny, the former SS, recruited into working for Dulles and Donovan, and then they used Dulles and Donovan. Dulles and Donovan utilized the Galen network to train Mossad, to train the people in Ukraine that we're talking about. Exactly. There's a direct lineage from the Galen org to today's tiny mustache man followers in the Ukraine. And also, as other people have pointed out, like the structure and the modus operandi of Islamic terror cells is the same model of Gladio as well. It's the strategy of tension, basically.
Which is, I mean, and with what's been going on in the Middle East lately, the way that they've been sort of shuffling mercs between the Mideast and Ukraine, the way that there's a direct historical connection between Israeli prime ministers in Ukraine, the way the Zelensky at one point, I think in March or April of last year, called Odessa the new Zion or the gateway to Zion or something like that. Like all of these things overlap so inextricably, really, that it's very, very difficult for anyone to argue that this isn't just one long continuing operation where mission parameters change because, well, it's fluid in the field, and that's just kind of how you have to react to things. But I mean, they're still all operating off of the same playbook. John Kiriakou, the CIA whistleblower, I had asked him about it one time, and he was like, well, there's no accountability, and these people really aren't as clever as we give them credit for. So of course they're going to use the same playbook. If you never get in trouble, it ain't broke. You know, don't fix it. And as long as you've got people that you can continue to compromise, if you have institutions like the United States government where the most devious are rewarded, the most corrupt are rewarded, the most sociopathic rise to the top, you're going to have a never-ending pool of sick bastards with which to draw from.
Yeah, exactly. Like the Galen organization, you would think, oh, well, since that's former SS people, like that wouldn't have any transition or consistency with the post World War II, liberation and democracy and the establishment of the state of Israel. No, actually, Otto Skorzeny and Reinhard Galen train people to do intelligence and assassination work in Israel. So you can begin to see that level is above the, chess piece level that we occupy at the, normie average person level, where we get caught up in national ideologies and we think, oh, it's this group versus that group. Well, no, that's why Operation Paperclip can bring these, SS people into the American structure, the intelligentsia, have them running NASA, have them running all these different programs at the same time as we are, arming the guerrillas in under Mao, right? So Bill Donovan goes and trains all of Mao's guerrillas at the same time as they're sending former Nazis to go and train people in Ukraine. German intelligence, the BND, actually comes from the Galen organization. That's just public knowledge. So democracy, right? The democratic government that it's actually an occupied government after the fall of the fascists. Then Uncle Sam comes into Germany and sets up a police state, which is ironic because I thought, well, wait a minute, I thought Hitler was a fascist police state style government, but we're going to bring freedom. No, actually, America just set up another police state. People don't know this, right? And this is the Morgenthau plan, which then completely changes Germany, starves a bunch of people. And then we set up, using former Nazis, the new intelligence apparatus in Germany, which is just created by the CIA and the OSS by Nazis. It's crazy. But you begin to see that those things don't really matter at that upper level, like that higher echelon, right, of the banking elite. Right, they fund the communists and they fund the fascists, so they don't really care about these ideologies at a lower. Those are just control mechanisms, basically.
Absolutely, and I mean, to that point too, there's Bank of International Settlement, direct relationship to the BRICS institutions.
Correct.
The Sequoia Capital and a bunch of other American, U.S., Western VCs are all funding the Chinese rival to ChatGPT. The way that I've described it basically is that you just got a big stack of cash in a room, and occasionally people come in with a wheelbarrow and they dump more on it, and every once in a while somebody else gets to walk in and put a little bit in their pocket, but mostly the money doesn't leave the room. Mostly the money just circulates around in the same hands, and whatever we can scrape together, through either our own merits or connections, or the way that we've been able to build and shape our luck, is in spite of rather than in conjunction with or via the good graces of all of the people who get to occasionally roll in a wheelbarrow or grab a little pile off the top of that big stack.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, I mean, that was one reason they chose the Vatican Bank as a perfect funneling mechanism. And it actually precedes the BCCI, because the Vatican Bank was the world's most private secret bank. And since it's not, since it's a city state, the Vatican City, right, Vatican State. It's not subject to the laws of Italy. And so it was much easier to funnel black money, black operations funding through the Vatican Bank than it was any other kind of bank. And back in the 60s, 70s, and 80s, when they were running Gladio, they needed, it was a legacy system. You couldn't use crypto or anything like that. You needed these liquid money, liquid ways to transfer cash in a very easy way, quick way. And so they utilized the Vatican Bank. And then they set up all these shell companies, which was the same model, right? So BCCI is just something that comes after, modeled on actually the older Vatican Bank model. So once you understand that, then kind of the whole thing makes sense, right? Because even though it's more sophisticated now, we're not using the Vatican. Actually, the Vatican Bank is still part of the international banking structure and still part of international scandals. Like the same thing goes on now with these kind of big banks that are, again, it's all the legacy system, right? Unless it's Bitcoin, it's all the legacy system in my view.
So what do you see happening with Bitcoin and with crypto? Because Bitcoin itself is starting to pump back up a little bit, and they're talking like it might be entering another bull phase. I don't know if that's people who are speculators who are trying to pump. I don't, there's a significant part of this world that I flat out don't understand. I'm not even going to pretend to, because I'll just end up sounding like a dumbass. But I mean, in your opinion, where do you say we can keep it specific to Bitcoin too?
Well, crypto is not big enough of a market yet to be anything other than something that still follows the macro, stock market, right? I mean, like the dollar and all that still has dominance, even though people are beginning to, leave the dollar. I understand that, but crypto is still smaller than gold. So it's like this tiny market that has the potential, to become something big. I think they want to do that. The establishment wants to co-opt and have FedCoin or utilize, like Davos says, one of these other centralized blockchains that they can control. So those are different strategies and different possibilities. I don't think that we're at the economy is not good enough to actually have a full-on crypto bull run. I think that we have people fleeing to Bitcoin to a degree because they understand the legacy system, the dollar, and all that is tanking. So probably you're right that the recent pumps are driven by some people fleeing and some speculation, but probably it's not enough yet to count as a bull market. I mean, we were waiting to see if it went past 30K, because 30K I think was one of the key resistance points, which people thought could trigger a bull. But again, you're not going to get a bull run with a completely tanked, shitty rest of the economy, unless enough people realize that something like Bitcoin is a safe haven, even better than gold. I mean, if you look at the last year of gold, you're up maybe 6%. And the last year, well, you're down with all crypto too, but the last 3, 4, 5, 6 months of Bitcoin is up. You're up like 60, 70%. So it just depends on, a lot of it depends, I think, on whether people figure it out or not, because it is a kind of complex thing if you're new to it. But when you understand what Bitcoin is, I think it makes sense that you understand that it's actually the answer to the whole BIS scam model.
I'm not a full believer. I'm not, although I do think that something like Bitcoin represents at least a doorway or a pathway to a legitimate counter economy. Although with new information about being able to generate energy, new information about ways that we could better network, we could better trade, we could better the transportation of things is going to perhaps be pretty critical. So with those in place, with new information coming in all the time, it's become easier for me to not necessarily adopt the new, sort of what the fuck, man. I mean, it's basically a religion, But I mean, it's the same reason I didn't take up surfing, Jay Dyer. Like, I didn't have the room in my life for a new religion. And it seems that there's a liberation theology attached to Bitcoin that makes me a little bit hesitant to go all in.
You mean like people who think that it's like the
Like my
salvation
friend, Nozomi Hayase, who's written prolifically on Bitcoin over the last several years. I mean, she legit sees, you know, but a liberation theology inside of the Bitcoin movement.
I see.
And has attached like a whole, you know, religious significance to it. And that in and of itself, and I don't know what portion of the community that represents, so I don't want to, you know, but that in and of itself.
Are you like a gold and silver person, or?
I am a food and bullets person, but gold and silver for sure. Yes, absolutely. But yeah, I think food and bullets are probably my favorite commodities at this point.
Well, I just meant if you had to pick an economic.
Oh, if I had to pick an economic system, I would, you know, I mean, honestly, doing it in seed currency would be ideal for me. However, if we're not going to do that, it would have to be something, either like I guess like Bitcoin Lightning, I think is what they're doing, the Lightning Network, something like that. Whatever Podcast 3.0 is running off of, that seems to be really fucking legit. I like where that's going a lot. And as a tangible alternative, 100% gold and silver. But I really do like where the podcasting 3.0 thing is going. I really like how that ecosystem is being built. I really like the philosophical underpinnings of how they want the economy to run. So it's something that as I learn more about, you know, I'm becoming more comfortable with and becoming more comfortable with talking about. But I'm going to admit, coming from a complete place of complete ignorance as of, you know, just a year or two ago. So it's been a little bit of a process, especially with all the other shit I got going on.
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Yeah. I mean, I think there's hesitancy is, you know, understandable given the dangers of tech, given the dangers of, you know, you know, there's a lot of misunderstanding too. I'm not talking about you, but I mean, like I see the people in the chat are talking about, oh, because Bitcoin is valued in fiat, it's a hoax. I mean, that doesn't mean anything. You could value something in any potential crossover. That wouldn't mean that the thing has no value. I mean, it's like saying that, you know, because I could value, I mean, think about a network itself, right? I mean, network has value. So if you have 10,000 computers, you know, and nodes running a giant global network, that's not fiat and that's not valueless. Think about Facebook. I mean, I hate Facebook, but I'm saying, why does Facebook have value other than obviously, yes, it's created by the deep state and all that. I know all that, but I'm saying that what makes it valuable? Well, it's a wealth of data and information. It's a global network that spies on everybody and does all this and all that. So that's why it has value. I'm not saying it's good. I'm just saying that that's why it has value.
Yeah.
In the same way, what does Bitcoin have network? Well, because it's a global, decentralized, hard asset where you can never be manipulated in the sense of having any inflation or increasing the supply, because you have a limited number of, you know, 21 million Bitcoin. So that's why it's that's one reason why it's valuable. There's many other reasons why it's valuable too, like it's, you know, based on math. It's not based on government decree or fiat. It's based, the only potential concern I would have is that there are people who have a lot of Bitcoin, and those people might have the ability to influence markets, but really the problem there is that, but they all work that way, right? Like fiat the same way, in the sense that there's people who have a lot of power. The BIS, Federal Reserve, they can influence the fiat. They decide the interest rates. They decide, you know, where the money's printed, where it's spent. You have with gold, people that have gigantic, you know, swaths of gold. They can control the gold flow, the mines. They can manipulate the gold market. And so I would say
Yeah.
that the best of those options, the least manipulable is even still, even if you have Bitcoin whales, it's still going to be something like that, in my view.
With civil asset forfeiture, one of those Bitcoin whales is the United States government too. They've seized a fuck ton over the last 4 years, and I think with Cointelegraph, whatever it is, one of the crypto finance magazines a year or so ago. And it's speculative because they didn't have hard data, but based on reporting and like LexisNexis search and a calculator of different articles they could find about seizures, they put them in like the top 25 holders of Bitcoin on the planet. Yeah. Yeah. So, I mean, that's one of the things that I do that does factor in it. And of course, man, there's always going to be people that control. If you've got a finite supply of something, there's going to be people or entities that are going to maintain more of it than other individuals. That's just, it's impossible to get it to where it's spread across evenly all across the board. That's Marxism. And even that isn't an equal application because we all know how that shit works. But no, I would look for the least worst option. I think that as long as nobody's being forced into it, I'm never going to have a problem with it. If we can also trade with a number of other currencies, if we can also do things, if we can also still, have a barter system or whatever, dude, I'm fine. I'm fine with it. And I can only encourage people to take alternative currencies more and more seriously because the imaginary crap that we're working with now is collapsing. Yeah. And there's just no way around that. So again, I mean, my whole thing is just not having it not having it as the only option, because that's when you guarantee that there's going to be more manipulation and more control over it.
Yeah, I think, Bitcoin comes out of the libertarian Austrian economics ethos. And so it's kind of hardwired to be part of a market economy. And it's, always been attached, I guess, to liberty. I guess theoretically, if it did become a future world standard for economics, at that point, you wouldn't necessarily be forced to use it, but it would kind of be like the only logical option. So it would be like a logical force to it, perhaps. Yeah, I don't know what to say about that. I mean, I guess it's just there's a pragmatic element to it where it's like, well, the world system in some degree has elements of free market. So the only way to inject a new model would be through the market, and then the market has to allow for individuals to buy it, to trade it, and so there's really no way to avoid the implementation of Bitcoin versus certain very wealthy and powerful people buying a lot of Bitcoin. There's just no other way. Yeah. You can't, like you said, in a Marxist way, give everybody in the world 0.01 Bitcoin or something like that. Like it would have to be done in the market, and then it would then eat up the market, which is, I think, the whole the logic of Bitcoin.
But I mean, that does present the opportunity to redefine what your own personal worth is, what your value is, what you value, how things are perceived. It gives an idea, or it gives an opportunity for I guess a little bit more, potentially a little bit more reality to creep into the markets than we've been operating under for, I think, my entire lifetime. I was born way back in 1978, but we had already been fully absorbed by the Bretton Woods. We had already been fully absorbed by this corporate capture, the Five Eyes system, and all of that kind of nonsense. And so I can only theorize about a truly free market. or at least, or a truly captured one for that matter, because there's still pockets of resistance where the gray market exists. But I don't know. I'm going to be a proponent of gray markets until I die. I really am.
What is that?
And black markets,
with that.
where there's things that are quote unquote. Well, okay. For example, in California, before cannabis became recreationally legalized, and this is consistent in a number of states where there has been full recreational legalization of the substance. The small and mid-size farmers, business operators, people who did, edibles and all of that kind of shit, they got driven into the ground and out of existence because the full recreation made it so that only venture capital cannabis could come into a state and effectively run it. There's a couple who've done it a little bit differently, and to their credit, Colorado and Washington State seem to have done it a little bit differently, and it's worked out better for them. But as a project, what had kept so many people and a lot of California's in general local businesses alive and operating during years of drought, during years of economic downturn, all of that stuff, was that there was a quasi-legal status for cannabis. You could obtain it medically with a permit, but if you didn't, there were still significant federal penalties for growing it, for selling, all that kind of stuff, for possessing it. And the gray market itself that flourished between what was legal and what was flat out still illegal was what allowed for, at least in the places that I lived, up to or slightly over half of the families were connected in any given county, were connected in some way to the cannabis trade. Property owners, for sure. There were people who were always doing work on people's properties. I don't know if you've ever been to a large scale cannabis grow operation, but it can be a fucking mess and it's a nightmare to deal with. And you got water lines and all kinds of shit. You need on-site maintenance regularly. At the end of the season, you need a ton of people to do giant cleanouts. There's always fixing and repairing stuff. It's a farm. You're on a working farm. You have to work every day, and there's always shit that needs to be repaired. Plus, you've always got to have people come in to trim and all of that shit. It was a very significant part of the overall economy is what I'm getting at. And that was drastically eliminated by full recreational cannabis, because anybody could just pop into a store, grab an eighth off the shelf, grab a pack of pre-rolls, whatever. And so the financial hoops that people had to jump through to get legal, to become a registered cannabis business, were set up to be so burdensome on the onset that if you didn't have the capital to start up with, you were done. And there were 3 phases of testing for your products, and they all had to meet this and that arbitrary standard set up by people who, at least in the county of Santa Cruz, the company that was doing the testing was ran by the kid whose mom was a federal prosecutor and father was a high-profile cannabis attorney. Like, it was just mobbed up from the get. Like, the whole thing was crooked. And it eliminated what was an effective and thriving gray market, made a bunch of people, at least this is how it went. We're going to price you out of, or not price you out of, but we're going to effectively oversaturate the market, making it incredibly difficult financially for you to get legally a part of it, while we've completely devalued the product by dint of sheer availability and volume. you know, and they put people into a situation where a lot of them had to move. A lot of them moved to Paradise. Right after that, the entire town of Paradise and Grass Valley got burned out. So then a bunch of people went to Southern California to try that out there, and then it got burned out right as the entire proposed path for high-speed rail in California had a nice line of wildfires that went in its direct blueprint, which was fascinating to me. That out of all the ways wildfire would choose to burn, it would choose to burn right over the direct proposed path for California high-speed rail. Odd. I didn't know fire behaved that way, but apparently it does. And it's funny, since they scrapped the project and they're not going to do the high-speed rail thing in California in a year, nary a wildfire near anywhere where a proposed path for it was. There was still a bunch of track left that hadn't been burned out, but the project got scrapped. So now Yosemite's getting burned out again, or what? They'll start back up in a couple of weeks. It's going to be 95 today in Vegas, Jay. It's April 11th. It's going to be 95 degrees. The weather machine's out of control right now. Harp is pissing me off. It is.
Right.
We're about to wrap the show up here, man. It's about 10 till 10. I got to get out of here. I have a radio to jump on pretty much immediately after. I appreciate the conversation, my friend. Please do come back and let everybody know where they can keep up with all of your projects. And to echo Pasta's earlier sentiment, look forward to seeing you this summer there in Tennessee. I will not be doing a one-man show, but I'll try to think of something.
Yeah, you can find me at jaysanalysis.com. You can find me on YouTube, Jay Dyer. You can find me on all the other social medias under my name. And then every Friday, I host the 4th Hour of Alex Jones. We just filmed the Tucker Carlson special that'll be coming out in the next couple weeks. I'll be doing a live event in California with Jamie Kennedy from Scream. We'll be doing, my wife and I have been doing live events for the last several months. A lot of fun. We have a great crowd, so you can get tickets to that at my website and on my socials. So, yeah, thanks for having me, man. It's a great chat. Yeah, I always learn from you guys. You guys are so up to date on all the news. I spend all my time in all these dusty old books, so you guys like catch me up on the news stuff. So.
I dig the balance too. It's why I hang out with the Grand Theft World community on Sunday evenings and all that stuff. Check in on your show as often as I can, because we're caught in this 3 hours a day, 5 days a week as it's coming, or hopefully before. We're trying to get people to prepare for the shit that's coming. So we try to keep up on it, but you do need to take a step back, and I need to do a little bit more of that myself, and jump into some dusty old books from time to time on that show. So appreciate the hell out of you, my friend.
All right, man.
We'll see you soon.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me.
Fantastic rest of your day, brother.
Later.
Cheers. Jay Dyer, buddy, Ryan Christian on a T-Lab Tuesday. Boy, that was a lot of fun. That was a lot.